Good evening. And I want to welcome you to a special night, a night that for a guy like myself is a long time and a long journey. I've known Cheri for quite a while, but the journeys that we all take, they come from so many different directions. And the idea of what we are doing here tonight, along with Cheri making probably a presentation that will change a lot of your ideas about addictions, about how each of us connect, because that's really what we're here for. We're not here to talk about addictions. We're not here to address the idea strictly of addictions. We're here more to talk about the idea that as a people, if we do not find ways to connect, that we are not going to ever find the healing that Christ wants us to have. I have a long journey. I could, testimony is long, and I'm not going to get into that whole thing tonight. I spent 45 years trying to fill a hole in myself that I could never fill. I tried everything, folks. There probably is very few addictions I didn't try. Alcohol, drugs, gambling, pornography, you name it, and I pretty much gave in to those temptations. And in 2010, through the grace of God, I came to the Lord. But as I had talked about earlier today in a short video I did, even when I came to the Lord and I was in the church, I still didn't feel connected. I looked around and I didn't see a bunch of people like myself. I felt isolated because I still felt like that guy who was a drunk. I still felt like that guy who was left out in the crowd, that didn't feel connected, that sat in parties and drank just because I didn't have anything else that I felt that I was going to do. The times I was being chased down by drug dealers, all those different times when I came to the Lord, there was a new wholeness in me, but not a completion. And by the grace of God, I found Cheri's program on 3ABN and Celebrating Life and Recovery. And in that program, I saw people like myself. I saw people connecting. I saw people that knew Christ and they were sharing with one another in a new way. They were not in the least bit afraid of one another. They were not afraid to share their testimony. They weren't afraid to say that they were broken. And that's what I wanted to say too. I mean, I want to tell people that, I'm broken and there's a brokenness among us. It's not about addictions. By the end of this month, on the 21st, we're going to do a program named Celebrating Life and Recovery. It's a 14-week program. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to do here live and around the world. We're going to connect with people on Zoom. So it is going to be just a wonderful thing. When you listen to Cheri, when you listen to her testimony, when you know what she has been through and what she can share, it's not anything more than what each one of us can share. It's just that God has anointed her with the special ability and the ability to bring people together. And that's what we're here for. It's all about connecting. It's all about sharing. It's not about that somebody here has an addiction to cigarettes or somebody's got an addiction to alcohol. Praise God, if we do have that issue, we want to talk about it. We want to deal with it. We don't want it to be hidden in the background just because we are now in a Christian church. We still have problems. So what we want is total and open sharing, connection, love. That's what this is about. We'll get to my wife wants to make sure she's coaching me from the crowd. So she wants to make sure that I tell you that it's going to be a 1 night a week, 14 weeks. So without further ado, let me introduce Cheri Peters. She is ready to go.
I'm going to move this over a little bit. Just because whenever I see a podium, it makes me feel like I somehow should be a pastor, and I feel like I should stand taller or be taller, and I just can't do it. So my name is Cheri, and I am so grateful to be here. I've been in recovery since 1979. Even when I say it, I just think, is anybody else in recovery? Okay, a couple people. So when you say that, when I first got into recovery, I didn't think I would get a day. I didn't think I would get a week. I definitely didn't think I would get a month or a year. And then all of a sudden, a year went by, 2 years, 3 years, and now we're looking at how many years at 1979? Like, how many? 41 years. Shut up. That is so good. Just go ahead and clap. No. I think, so anyhow, tonight we're going to talk about addictions, and I'm going to tell you some things about addictions that most people don't know, and it's kind of the secret to recovery. I don't know why all of the research is coming back with these ways to recover and even kind of confronting some of the ways that we've tried in the past. So we're going to cover some of that tomorrow. Neurochemistry and addiction, what kind of things that will help you get good brain health and all that stuff. But tonight I thought we would just get to know each other. So I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. And my whole family, raise your hand if you have a crazy family. Anybody? You know, my whole family has stuff, you know, and do you love them? Right? And you love them. Like, I have a sister that's a stripper. She's so cool. And she like walks in the room like, hi, how are you? And I just tell her, you don't have to pose like that. You don't have to walk like that. But, you know, it's who she is. And I have a meth addict sister, and I have, you know, so I have all of this stuff. But I came from a family that is just steeped in addictions. I mean, my grandmother, she died of alcoholism and diabetes. You know, she drank all the time. Even when she was dying, I'd go over there to help her, and she would say, you know, I'd like for breakfast vodka, orange juice, and a pastry. And I say, you're diabetic. I never did like you. I'm like, wait, ouch, you know. But I mean, you know, so everybody in our family, uncles died of their addictions. I had one uncle was my favorite uncle. He was so funny. And I would say to him, you know, hey, Graham, how come you're so yellow? And I mean, he was yellow. Skin was yellow. His eyes, the whites of his eyes were yellow. And I mean, he was yellow. And he said, my mama was a duck. I didn't know you could do that. You know, I just, you know, so they were very funny, but they were very strung out. And so for those that don't know, when you turn yellow, your liver's just failed, right? And a lot of my relatives were actually waiting during their time of their death. They were waiting for livers, you know. So we had addictions that were crazy. My dad was alcoholic. My dad was alcoholic from high school. Anybody know anybody drinking in high school? So from high school, he was already drinking. My mom got brought over from Canada to the U.S., and she had been put up a couple grades. So she was 12 years old in the ninth grade, which I think you shouldn't do that. They're just too young emotionally. But my dad saw my mom and said, "Hey, baby," got her drunk, got her pregnant, and their relationship started. So she started having children really, really young. And my dad and my mom, I don't know why, but they got together. So you would think that that wouldn't happen, but they got together. My dad quit school, got a job, and my dad was not, um, let's say, not the most respectful person you'd meet. Like you were his boss, and let's say you were his boss, and he'd be going like, "Excuse me, were you talking to me? I'm just curious. Were you talking to me just now?" And the boss would tell him to do something, and he'd get right in his face. Just guess how long he kept that job, right? So he would not keep a job. Then he would come home and beat my mom because he wouldn't be in this situation if she hadn't gotten pregnant, right? So he was drinking. He was abusive. My mom had my sister, and um, for anybody that's well, my mom felt like when she had my sister that everything would be perfect. When she was little, my grandmother put her from home to home as she drank and partied. And so I think my mom, when she got pregnant, felt like that she would have a child, she would have a home, everything was going to be great. My dad started drinking more and more and beating her more and more. And she realized this was not going to be as great as she thought it was going to be. And then she gets pregnant again. So she's holding my sister, a couple months old, and she's pregnant again. And she just said, "I'm not doing this again." And she tried everything to abort. She tried um, taking pills. She tried getting into hot water. She tried like just jumping on things for her stomach, just like, can I miscarriage that way? Somebody said if you can cut the sac that the baby's in, you'll miscarriage. She tried that. Then you just cut herself, not me. And when she went in the hospital to have me, she was depressed and very angry. My dad was still drinking. It was still abusive. And she felt like when she went in the hospital, what she said to me throughout my life is that she did not want to take me home. Like, I don't want to take another baby home. And she didn't want to sign the birth certificate, didn't want to do a name. From what I remember early on, is I couldn't get her to even touch me. Like, I so wanted as a little girl for her to touch my face, for her to let me sit next to her. I thought, wouldn't that be incredible for her to say she loved me? And I tried everything. I would try to be cute. I would try to be funny. I would try different things. And what she would say to me is, "Why do you always hang on me?" And I thought, I don't know. And I don't know, but there was this sadness that I just wanted to be held. Um, my mom had 5 kids before she was in her early 20s. And so she just had one child after another after another. My dad got no better in his drinking. He got caught molesting me when I was 3 months old. My grandmother caught him. And so I don't remember any of that, of course. But he got caught molesting me at 3 months old. So I don't know what it feels like to have a mother that loves you or a father that loves you, right? It was always, in our household, it was always very twisted. My dad was kicked out when I was 4, and my mom moved a bartender in. And I love him. Has anybody had a bartender as a stepdad? He was fun. He was a jazz singer. He liked playing piano. He was funny. He was always smoking weed. Like he would, you know what? Let me tell you a story. So he was always high, and he would do things that was like just silly stuff. Like one of the things that he did that I thought was amazing is he would teach us how to do different games. And one of the games was you stick peas up your nose and shoot them at each other. Has anybody played that? I'm very good at it, right? And so the only time you didn't want to play with somebody with that game is if they had a cold. Then I just saw all this snot fall at the peas. But I mean, he would teach us that kind of stuff, and we just had fun. He taught us like to wad up hamburger and just throw it as hard as you could, and it would stick on the ceiling, and you wait until it falls on someone, right? And I mean, could you imagine what our house looked like? our house was filthy. I mean, it was just a mess. And but we would dance and play, and my mom worked night shift, and he would come home at 2 or 3 in the morning, and what I remember about him is, besides how funny he is that he would have to get us up in the morning and get us ready for school. But if you've ever lived around alcoholics or drug addicts, sometimes they would party all night. We would party with them all night. And then when we were supposed to be getting up for school, we're just getting ready to go to bed. So his only job was to get us up. And so he would have to find a way to get out of getting in trouble by my mom for us not being ready for school. So he would go in the kitchen and he would get like a big bowl, and he would put all kinds of stuff in the bowl: corn, peas, just minestrone soup, whatever he could find, mix it together, and he would throw it on the sidewalk in front of the house, and he'd say they couldn't go to school because they all threw up. you know, and I thought, how fun is this guy? And so he would do things like that, was just so ridiculous. He never beat us. He never molested us. He never beat my mom. And so beside his addictions were pretty intense, but he was safer than my dad. In my household, the only person that I felt like really loved me was an aunt that I saw once a year. And I saw her at my grandmother's house every year. My grandmother's sister, she was very funny. She one time looked at me, and I don't even know how little I was, but she looked at me and she said, "You are so beautiful." And I started just crying, right? And she picked me up. It was like this knowing that, and I'm sure she knew something was wrong. That's not a normal reaction. And she just picked me up and held me. And then every year that I saw her, she made it a special thing. Her and I were just best friends. She would tell me jokes every time she saw me. And she was an actress. So we're from California. She was an actress. And so she would tell me these jokes. And she would tell me jokes like an actress would tell jokes. Her son was in The Little Rascals. He was a child actor. I mean, so they were really seriously into acting. And so she would tell me this joke. And I'm going to tell you the joke because it will make sense. Something else I'll tell you later. But everything I say, I want you to say pea soup. So what'd you have for breakfast? What'd you have for lunch? What'd you have for dinner? What'd you do all night? And as a little kid, I laughed my head off. I thought that was the funniest thing ever. And she would tell me that joke, and my sisters would say, "That is not funny. That was not funny." And we would just laugh. And I just felt like I just felt that somebody loved me. I would sit with her. She would hold me. She would tell me jokes. And even though I only saw her once a year, I believe she kept me alive. I don't know if you have someone like that in your life, but I believe she kept me alive. And when I was 8 years old, I ran up to my grandmother's house, and I was just like, "Oh, no, 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 no." And then I realized I didn't see her car, and I said, "Where's Annie Kay's car?" And my mom simply said, "Your aunt is dead, and I don't want you crying because you'll upset your grandmother." And I thought, I don't know if I fully knew what dead meant, right? I mean, I just thought, you know what? She can't be dead because she would not have left me here by myself. She would have taken me with her. Whatever that meant, she would have taken me to. And I started crying, and my mom says, "You need to stay outside." And I tried to pull it together because it's Christmas. Everybody's in my grandmother's house. It's Christmas, eating and looking at presents. And so I kept trying to pull it together, and I could not. I just kept crying, and I kept crying, and I kept thinking that I couldn't survive without hearing her or seeing her again. And all of a sudden the clouds kind of part, and the sun filters through the clouds, when you see that. And all I heard, not a voice, but I heard in my head, "What did you have for breakfast?" And I thought, you know what? It's going to be okay. I didn't know why it was going to be okay, but so I went in. They celebrated Christmas, and what had happened is my aunt had killed herself. And raise your hand if you know this is true. There was a day and time, if you committed suicide, no one talked about it. Anybody know that's true? No one talked about it. You could have died of anything else, but suicide was not talked about. And so they were afraid that I would start crying, and my grandmother would have to do that whole thing and over again. And so they just didn't want me to cry. And so I realized that she had killed herself. So I went home and I thought, well, I'm going to kill myself, you know, and I, I couldn't figure out how to do it. You know, like some people like pain, like they can cut themselves and stuff. I don't know how you do that. There's just no way. I don't like pain. I don't like any of that stuff. And so I thought, well, I'll just jump off the house. And I'm not sure why I didn't think that would hurt, but I would just jump off the house. And so it took me forever to climb up there. But before I got on the top of the house, I had put a mattress down. So, so that when I jumped, I would fall on the mattress. And there, you know, I'd die, but I would break the fall. And so I jumped off the house, which was only one story, landed on the mattress, and I'm laying there like nothing, no scratches, nothing. I'm like, what's this, you know? And my mom comes out and says something like, what are you doing? Go play. I go, all right, you know. And, you know, so my suicide attempts were not really successful. Child Protective Services came in a few times to try to remove us kids, never did. Our house was the house that was not taken care of. Does anybody know the druggies' houses in your neighborhood? You know, our house was a house that wasn't taken care of. The lawn wasn't mowed. We had slats windows that you kind of rolled up and they would open and close. And most of those were broken. I mean, it just wasn't taken care of. And I hate to even say this one with Brad. When I first met Brad and he went to my parents' house, he didn't want to go to the bathroom at their house because it was just dirty, you know. And I got mad at him, like, you know, are you too good to go to the bathroom at my parents' house? And then I looked at the bathroom after he left to go to the gas station. I looked at the bathroom and I thought it is pretty intense. But anyhow, so I was raised in a household that was full of addictions, full of violence, full of drama, and not being wanted. And when I was, when I jumped off the house, I ended up injuring myself, right? And I started to limp, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And finally, they took me to Children's Hospital in Long Beach, California, and they found out I had a disease called Perthes disease. Has anybody ever heard of that? It's kind of at leg Perthes. It's like there's certain bones as you grow from the infant, your bones get harder and harder. So and with leg Perthes, they stay like a sponge. They don't get hard. And so my hips didn't get hard. So every time I walked, it would just wear that joint out. And so when I jumped off the house, I aggravated that. So when they got me to the Children's Hospital, what they found out is that I had this disease. And what they did at the time is they put you in a full body cast, right? And so just imagine from your neck down in a full body cast. I'm like 8 years old. And they just had changed from the full body cast to full braces, orthopedic shoes, and crutches. So I was lucky enough to avoid the body cast and to get in the braces and crutches. But what was incredible about Children's Hospital to me is when I went to Children's Hospital, the doctor called me by name and waited for me to answer. And I'm like wanting to look around, like, what's happening here, you know? And it was so loving and so respectful that I almost cried then. It was like the nurse came in, and when she touched me, she literally touched me and asked me something, and it was so kind. And I thought, I didn't even know how to respond to it, right? And I just thought, you know what, I'm depressed. I'm having all of this stuff at home, and yet this was my safe place. The doctors were incredible. The physical therapists were incredible. They started having me do range of motions in a swimming pool 3 times a week. I had to leave school. Anybody in school right now? I had to leave school to go swimming. And I thought, well, I could do that, you know. And as this abused kid, I'm thinking that's cool. And everybody else that was at this place, they had hydrocephalic kids with big heads and kids with deformities that were really intense. And I took my braces and crutches out. I'd run to the pool, you know. And then I realized that there was a hydraulic lift that some kids got wheeled to and got on this lift and went over the pool, and then they got to set in the water. And I thought, I want to do that. It's like, you know, what am I having to walk down the steps? You know, and so I started saying to the nurses, you know, I think I should be on the lift. And they said, no, you have legs. And I thought, don't hold that against me. And I remember just feeling like you should put me on the lift. And then the other kids voted that I would be put on the lift. And so I would run out, jump on that lift, and we'd get lowered into the pool. One kid, probably like you, one kid came up and said, "Hey, would you like to race across the pool?" And I said, "No." "Are you chicken?" "No, I'm not chicken. I don't want to race you." "Come on." I said, "Are you chicken?" I said, "No, I'm not racing you." And he came up and he poked me like, and I'm thinking, I'm not racing you. And then all of a sudden I thought, I'm not going to be nice anymore. Has anybody ever told you you don't have any arms? He had fingers sticking out of his shoulder. That's it. And I thought, if we get in a pool and race, I'm winning. You know, it's just look at you, right? And so he's like, "Come on." And I'm like, "Okay, but I'm not giving you a head start. I'm not nice like that." Right? And so we jump in the pool and he's like a little dolphin. And he beats me badly. And I'm thinking that was funny. And the next new kid that came on, he'd say, "Hey, want to race across the pool?" And we'd all laugh because he did that with every new kid. But with that, him doing that with me, I just felt like part of the group. You know what I mean? It was the first time in my life I think I ever felt a part of anything. And I felt a part of the group. My mom had to drive me to the hospital. We went to breakfast together. We didn't eat breakfast together at home, right? Now we're going to breakfast together. And I thought, you know what? She's going to learn that I'm okay, right? And I thought, while we have breakfast and while we do all this kind of stuff, she's going to learn that I'm okay. And so I tried everything. I was cute. I was funny. And I ordered something at the restaurant. And I took too long. And she's like, what's so hard about this? Just order something. And I thought, okay, it's a pancake house. So I'm going to order pancakes every time we come here. So I ordered pancakes and then I chewed them. And she said, "Why do you chew like a cow?" And I thought, I don't know. And so I just thought, I won't chew, right? And so I'm literally trying everything to try to get acceptance. And within a few months, she said that at one of the breakfasts, she said that we were taking too much of the family's time with the physical therapy and all that. And so they're going to send me to live with an aunt who lives in Canada. So we're sending you away. And I remember sitting there. So I thought you were starting to like me. I thought we were actually starting to connect. And I don't want to go away. And I thought, if I can get you to like me here, if you send me 3,000 miles away, I'll never get you to like me. And so I said, no, I'll do all the chores. I'll do everybody's work. I'll be good. I'll never do anything wrong, which a kid can't even say that, but I'll never do anything wrong. And she said, no, you have to go. And so they sent me to an aunt's house in Toronto, Canada. And this aunt was 70 years old, diabetic, Christian. I didn't even know what that meant, Christian or diabetic. But I walked into her house and she had, I was really angry. She said, "I love you." And I said, "I hate you and you can't keep me here. This is like kidnapping." I mean, I'm screaming my head off. I'm like, "Don't talk to me. Don't touch me." And there was a dead guy hanging on her wall. And I said, "Who is that?" And she said, "Oh, that's God." And I thought, oh, great. And I remember thinking, I never did ask her about it again. It was just this dead guy hanging there. And I thought, if that's God, I'm in trouble, And I did everything. I was hateful. I was mean. She tried to do the nicest thing. One time she came out and she said, "Can I see your teeth?" And I said, "No." And I'm holding my mouth as tight as I can shut. And she's prying my mouth open. Like, "Can I see your teeth?" And I said, "No." And finally she says, "Your teeth are green." And they did have a lot of plaque on them. And she said, "Your teeth are green. And if you brush them with baking soda, we can get that off." And I screamed. To this day, it's just ridiculous. I screamed and I said, "I don't even have to brush my teeth at home." She's like, "That's probably obvious." But I mean, to me, I was like, I don't have to brush my teeth here. There was a sink in our bathroom at home, busted, and was fixed like years and years later. So if we brushed our teeth, it was in the bathtub, and most of the time I don't remember brushing my teeth. And so she says, "Well, you're brushing your teeth here." I am not. And she like picked my little self up, drugged me in the bathroom, and every time I screamed, she stuck the toothpaste in my mouth and brushed my teeth. And I would try to hold my mouth shut, but then I want to protest, and she would just start brushing again. So she tried everything, but I was literally horrible. I stopped talking. I'm not going to talk at school. I'm not going to talk at home. You can't make me do anything. And finally, the counselor at school decided to send me home. This is not good for her, right? And they sent me home, and my um, stepdad, or my mom's boyfriend, was, I think he was not drinking or trying not to drink, but something happened and a fence got tipped over in front of our house. It wasn't put together that well anyway, but it got tipped over. And he said something to me like, the happiest times of our lives was when you were gone, and we do not want you back here. And I was 11, and I remember standing there thinking, he does not want me back here, you know. And I start crying, and my friend, who had come over because I'd been gone all year, my friend had come over, and she said, you know how Mac is, he didn't mean that. And I thought, for the first time in my life, I just felt like I need to stop lying to myself. This is not my home, and they do not want me here. And I just cried and cried and cried. And then I remember somebody saying somewhere that the reason people do drugs and alcohol is they don't want to deal with their problems. Have you ever heard that? So I thought, I better find me some drugs and alcohol then, because I don't want to deal with any of this. And I found somebody that would give drugs to an 11-year-old girl. Do you think they're safe? And they gave me as much as I wanted. Most of the time I couldn't walk, but it was the first time I didn't want to kill myself, or I didn't want to kill you. I didn't care whether I was liked or not liked. And it felt like I found the answer, that I don't care whether my mom likes me, that's her issue. I don't care whether I fit or don't fit. I don't care about any of that. And I remember thinking that all I have to do is stay high for the rest of my life. By the next year, I was pregnant, just like my mom, same age. And my mom said the same thing as her mom said to her, is you need to get married. But the guy that took responsibility for the pregnancy was in the Navy. And so he decided or agreed to marry me. I don't know what anybody was thinking, because it's not legal. And so we were going to go into Mexico and get married. By the time we got all that stuff arranged, I was 8.5 months pregnant. I weighed 104 pounds. I was smoking like crazy and doing a ton of drugs. And I went into labor. And so when I went into the hospital, they didn't even think I was pregnant because I was just so small. And I went in and delivered twins, a boy and a girl. And they could literally fit in the palm of your hands. And this is a weird thing to say, but I believe the same thing I think my mom believed, is I would have a baby and finally have a family. I would be the best mom ever. And I was doing tons of drugs, smoking, not having any clue that what I was doing to my body was affecting these babies. And so when you work with addicts, please don't think, is that me? I don't know what I do differently. I'll just forget about it. So I'm an addict, so denial is easy for me. But anyhow, so I just felt like I was going to be the best mom. And the doctor came in, and one of the twins were stillborn, and the other one lived for about 8 hours. And he said, do you realize that you caused their death? And I remember wanting to just hit him, like, how could you say that? Because I did not cause this. I didn't hurt these babies. I would never want to hurt these babies. And so after the boy died, I was going to go home and not get married. And my mom said, you need to get married. You need to still get married. And so we went into Mexico, we got married, and he moved me into his mother's house. Do you think his mom liked me? I was a 12-year-old drug addict that just ruined her son's life, right? And she would literally almost shake if she had to invite me to the table. He went overseas for 6 months, so I was there with her and her other children, which I was younger than her other children. And she just had a hard time. She tried to be nice, and I actually understand that now. I didn't understand that then. I just thought, what is it? I mean, do I have two heads? Do I, what's wrong that here's another person that really looks at me with so much anger and so much hatred. And but I thought, you know what? I don't have to be here because I'm an adult now, right? I can just go and I don't have to be here. And so I left and ended up on the streets of Los Angeles. I turned 13 by that time. So 13 on the streets of LA, and there were 80,000 kids like me on the streets of LA at that time. And you are funneled into industries that are pretty dark within 24 hours. And when I say that, I'm not going to get into detail about all that, but you are picked up and used. And so when somebody drives through LA and they say, you know what, I don't see a lot of teenagers or kids on the street. Does anybody know why you don't? Because they're being used. They're being funneled around. You will see them when they're crazy. You will see them when they're strung out to the point where they can't be used anymore. But until then, it will look like there's no homeless kids at all when you drive down the streets. I saw things that were so destructive. Like I remember one time getting picked up by a group of bikers, and they were doing initiations for new members. I didn't know what that meant, and they picked up 3 girls from the streets. They just promised drugs and some other stuff, and so I went. And I'd never been camping. Raise your hand if you've ever been camping. I'd never. My mom's boyfriend, the bartender, would go like this when, come here, I want to tell you a story. Have you ever been camping? It's so much fun. Unbelievable. And he would smoke weed and tell us these incredible stories about camping. Never took us, but we'd hear these stories. And so when I found out that these bikers were going camping, I thought, you know what? I want to go camping. Now it just sounds like fun. So we got some drugs. I got on the back of a bike of a guy who was a sergeant of arms, 38 years old, gave me some drugs. I got on the back of the bike, came up to this campground, and there were probably 300 other bikers there, all kind of in a group over here. And so I got off the bike and I started to walk towards that group. And this guy got up and he said, hey, did I tell you you could walk away from me? And I laughed at him. Did I ask you? And he hit me in the face as hard as he could. And he was 38 and I was, like I said, probably 14. I don't know how old I was at that time, but he hit me in the face. And I remember falling back and hitting a tree and just being enraged. Like, I don't even know you. And what are you doing hitting me? And I was tiny. And I just got up and hit him as hard as I could. And he laughed and hit me again. And I got up and spit on him and hit him. And now by this time, everybody's laughing. And I remember just the rage of thinking, are you laughing at me? And I don't even know you. I don't even know you. And I got up and I hit him again. And the last time he hit me, I felt things crack. Like I felt my face cracked. I felt I lost a couple teeth. I hit the same tree, which they thought was funny. And I laid on the ground and I was just, if you've ever been in a domestic violence or any kind of violent situation, you try to assess yourself. Like I just had my tongue and I'm trying to figure out like how much damage was done. And I'm assessing all that. I could tell there's blood everywhere. And he looks at me and he comes up and he says, man, you are really gutsy. I like that. I'd like you to be my old lady. And I thought, is he asking me out? Because I'm thinking, no. And I remember just the weirdest thing to know that I was in a world that if you could get punched in the face and not have it kill you and get up and punch back, that you actually have gained respect, right? And I'm thinking, what is this world, right? And so now I said, no, thank you. I don't want to be your old lady. And he said, oh, that wasn't a question. You are now my property. And so I was his property for the next couple of weeks. During that time, I listened as a 13-year-old girl was murdered. You could feel her, when she was screaming, you could hear her lungs filling up with fluid, and she couldn't scream because you could just hear like the gurgling stuff in her lungs, right? And so the things I saw on the street were not easy things. They were not, like when somebody said to me one time, when you were on the street, did you like live on a newspaper and have a shopping cart? And I started crying, like I wish, are you kidding me? That sounds a lot safer. Did you couch surf? Are you kidding me? I wish. And so it was like all of those things that people assume homelessness is. It's not that way for a lot of people. And so the violence that I saw on the street was pretty intense. I remember just wanting to survive that whole thing with the bikers, and I just got high. So my survival thing was just to take more, and I did that for about 10 years. If I met a pastor on the street, it was because they had darker addictions. If I met a police officer on the street, it's because they had darker addictions. I didn't meet a lot of legitimate folks, and when I say um, um, I was selling, well, I was selling some drugs to an undercover officer one time, not just me, but the whole group of kids that were kind of hanging out. And we were selling cross tops to them. And it's just little tablets that had a cross on, and they were speed. But if you get saccharin tablets, they look the same. You just have to put crosses on thousands of them. And so we did thousands and thousands of these saccharin tablets, and we sold them. Everybody that in my group said, I'm going to take off because when they find out this is saccharin, they're going to come back. And I said, yeah, but what could they do? So they took off. I stayed at the house. Of course, we got rid of everything in the house. So we didn't have anything in the house we could get busted with and all that kind of stuff. And so they came back. We're really angry about the saccharin tablets. I got beat up horribly and then arrested for having a water pipe. In my day and age, raise your hand if you had a water pipe. In my day and age, almost everybody had them for decorations, even if you didn't use them. Does anybody know I'm telling the truth? They were just sitting there, you know? And so I got arrested for having no paraphernalia, even though it wasn't something that was used. They took me to the jail. And also what I knew getting arrested is nobody will come bail you out. Like they're not going to use their money or anything to bail you out. So I was just going to be in jail for however long. But within a short period of time, a few hours, I get, they're telling me I'm out. My attorneys come. And I'm thinking, oh, my attorney? Like, what does that mean, you know? And I get out there, and there's this old guy in a suit. He just is a beautiful, he looks like an attorney. I mean, he just looked like an attorney. And he said, I heard what happened to you about the apartment complex letting the police in and about you getting beat up. And we're going to sue. And I'm taking your case. You don't even have to worry about any money until like the very end, and I'll take my money off the top before you get paid. And I said, man, sounds good. So it took me to his office in Newport Beach, beautiful office, gorgeous, had a receptionist there and took pictures. She took pictures of my bruises and my injuries. And I'm getting ready to leave. And he said, do you need any money? I said, well, yes, I do. And so I was brave enough to say like $300. And he gave it to me. And I said, well, how am I going to, do I give this back to you? Do I owe you? And he said, no, I'll take it off the top. And a few days later, he calls me, how are you doing? Need any money? Yeah. And so we did that for a while, and I would call him if I needed any money. So I ended up being really reliant on him for money after a while. And then he said that, I'm sorry, but the lawsuit didn't go through. There's just no way we can sue them, and this and that happened. And I said, well, how am I going to make some money? Because I was really reliant on him. And he took me to a home in Newport Beach that just looked like a normal home in a really, really nice area, but it was where they take all the child prostitutes. And how they got child prostitutes in that area is they would bail kids out of jail. And so with him, he took me there. I never did prostitution. It's stupid to say that because it's like a thief saying I never stole gum. It's like I did a lot of things in my life, but I was molested so much as a kid. I just never got into prostitution. I have nothing against people that have. In fact, I have a lot of friends that were prostitutes. I just couldn't do it. And so even when he took me there, he left, said somebody was going to come over. I was just to let them in. I did not let them in. I just got quieter. The guy kept knocking on the door. Pretty soon I realized that he had his own key. He opened the door and I just started screaming. And because I was so loud and so obnoxious, he left and then I left. So I never got into prostitution, but what I learned is the ways people tend to get prostitutes off the street is pretty incredible. So when I would meet anybody that was supposed to have a legitimate job, it was a darker kind of thing. I was strung out on heroin by that time and dealt a lot of drugs. And I ended up doing a drug deal. I was now 23. I was fairly illiterate, functionally illiterate. I had done a lot of different things, but dealing drugs was probably the easiest thing to do on the streets. It was better than working in clubs or dancing or any of that stuff. And so I started to deal drugs, and we were doing some drugs, dealing some drugs to a group out of San Francisco, and we flew in. Um, my job, and I didn't realize this until I was in therapy. So if anybody thinks I'm really stupid, you might be right. Uh, but my job was, somebody would say, we're going to go park the car. Can you check the luggage in? And I would say, yeah, And I didn't realize I was always the one with the drugs, right? And so, but that's what they use kids for, because the younger you can use somebody to run drugs, the less time they will get when they get busted and all that kind of stuff. So they use kids for running drugs. If you have large sums of money, it's also illegal. And I was the one that checked luggage in when it was packed with money, the same kind of thing. So we went to San Francisco. I was by this time so, like, I thought, is there anybody normal? Is there anybody legit? And so we went in San Francisco. We were selling 7 pounds of cocaine to a guy that owned a restaurant right on the beach, right on the ocean. And so he's coming in and serving us meals and checking out the drugs. Like, we had scales and we had chemicals to test drugs and all that kind of stuff, cash on the table. And he's giving us, would you like wine with that? And I'm thinking, who's eating? We're druggies. We've been freebasing coke for days. Nobody's going to eat much. But it was like we were just being served. And I thought, is there anybody real? I want to grab somebody by the throat. I want to say, I'm looking for anybody real. I'm looking for anybody that actually is good. Anybody, And then this owner comes in and I'm just wanting to scream. I'm in no mood. I've been up for days. We do the drug deal. We get the cash. We're flying home now, and we have $67,000 in a suitcase. We have $11,000 in a separate thing, and I'm like carrying most of that. We get to the drug house I'm living in. We do some business there, and I've been up for so many days that I'm going to go crash. And when I say crash, I mean crash. It's almost like a death. You're dehydrated. You've been up. You've not drank a lot. You're a little bit psychotic. So I'm going to go crash. And when I go into the room, I literally don't remember anything other than being out. And then I remember somebody coming in and slamming a gun to my face and just screaming, I'm going to blow your head off and nobody steals from me and na. And the first thing I had to try to do is try to wake up, because like I said, I'd been up for a while. And I realized that it's this crazy guy I just went to San Francisco with, and he thinks I stole $11,000 from him, right? And it's not his; it's an attorney that the drugs are his. But anyhow, so he's screaming, and the only thing I could think of is, thank God, I have been trying to kill myself my whole life. Just pull the trigger. I wanted to say thank you so much, because I'm not good at it. I put mattresses down, right? And so he starts screaming more, because he's like, are you crazy? I'm going to blow your head off. So, you my psychiatrist? Pull the trigger. Are you a little girl? Do you want me to get you some help? I tried to do anything to get him just to pull the trigger, and he would not. He just would not. And then I realized that he was just trying to scare me. And I thought, my next breath scares me. I don't want to do this again. I don't want to do this tomorrow. And so I am trying to get him to shoot me. He's trying to get me scared. And by that time, he just walks out, and I'm sitting there in this drug house trying to figure out what to do. And I did not want to breathe. I did not want to move. I did not want to do the next day, because I don't know if anybody has been in that lifestyle, but man, just try to survive day in, day out with just your addiction alone is one thing, but not having really a place to settle and all that stuff, it's just awful. So I just didn't want to do on any of that. And I survived the next couple of days just kind of going through the motion. And then I thought I better go get some help, because I don't think I'm going to make it. I think I am truly going to kill myself. And anybody want to guess where I went to get help at? where would you think I'd go? Salvation Army Church? I went to my mom's house. How crazy is that? She has hated me since I came out of the womb, you know? And I'm thinking, I walk in, I have teeth missing, I'm less than 100 pounds, I'm strung out on heroin, I looked horrible, horrible. And I walk in, and somebody says, "Wow, haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing?" What do you think I said? Fine. Why do we do that? We don't look fine. We think we do. We just don't look fine. And I said, fine. And I sat down. The house was dark. It was filthy. It hadn't changed a bit. My mom's boyfriend was smoking weed and watching a football game. And my mom was laying there. My mom now is prescription drug addict. So she was just laying there. And I'm just thinking, what did I come back here for? Because there's nothing. Somebody did say something like, I'm really proud of you. And I thought, yeah. Proud for what? Well, I'm proud that you never came home and asked for money. And I thought I was a baby when I left. I was a baby. And I just wanted to scream. And finally I'm like, I have to go. I just wanted to stop by. I'm getting ready to leave. And my mom says she went back to school since she saw me last. I'm thinking, no way. Everything stopped for me. I know her boyfriend, I know my dad, I know that all the kids, and my sister's a stripper. I'm a homeless heroin addict. My other sister's a meth addict, sells meth out of the garage. My brother was alcoholic. My dad, the molester, is now experimenting with sex and methamphetamines. And I mean, I'm just thinking, going back to school, that's amazing. And I mean, it's amazing. So I said, that's amazing. What are you taking in school? You want to guess? She said, social work. No way! Are you nuts? Are you kidding me? And those crimes where somebody is stabbed like 300 times? I just understood that crime that moment. I thought, you know what? I want to stab you right in the neck. Because I was just so angry. Like, Mom, Joni is making meth in the garage. She's dealing, all her teeth are rotted out. All of us, all addicted in some ways. We've all had these really screwed up lives. And she's going to be a social worker. And I wanted to scream like, we're not social work material. I don't want to burst your bubble or anything like that. Mac is sitting there. He's 6'1", about 110 pounds, right? I mean, he's got esophageal cancer. He's got cancers all over his body. He's been on drugs since he's 11 years old. We're just not. And so, raise your hand again if you know I'm telling the truth. In my day and age, because I'm 1,000 years old, in my day and age, nobody ever talked back to their parents. Anybody? You just didn't do it. I don't care. Your parents could say the craziest thing, and you would say, yes, ma'am. You just didn't talk back to them. So as she's saying this, I'm like wanting to scream. I'm wanting to shoot somebody. I'm wanting to just, like I said, stab her in the neck. I'm just so angry. The only thing I said, good luck with that. I got to go. Because I felt like somebody was sucking all the air out of my whole environment. I couldn't breathe, right? So I have to go. And she said, I have something for you. And I'm thinking, what does she have for me? She went in the other room and she got me a manila envelope and she brought it out and handed it to me. And I said, thank you. And I left. Went back to the drug house I lived in. There was a naked guy on cannabinol in the living room, high as could be. And when you live in a drug house, you can't say somebody, you need to get out of here, because it's not your house, right? And I wanted to scream, you need to get out of here. And I go in the bathroom. Has anybody, raise your hand if you just know a heroin addict, right? You shoot up enough heroin, you'll throw up if it's really good, right? And if you don't have any meth addicts, it never gets cleaned up. You have to have a meth addict there. So anyhow, I go in the bathroom and somebody has shot up. They've thrown up everywhere. There's a naked guy in the living room and I am done. I'm done. I go in the room and I throw the manila envelope on the bed and I'm trying to find something to kill myself with, right? Like I said, I'm not into pain, so cutting my wrists were not any options for me. But I saw some syringes and I thought, you know what? I'm going to pump air into my veins until my heart explodes. I don't know why I didn't think that would hurt, but that was my plan. And as I was turning around to set that up, I see the manila envelope. And is anybody Christian in the room? So I see them in an envelope, and it was the first time I felt the presence of God. I felt safe for the first time in my life. Um, Even saying that now, I can feel that moment where I knew that I was safe. And so I didn't know it was God. I don't know how God shows up like that, but I felt safe. I felt loved for the first time. And I felt like what God said, not words, but what I felt like He impressed on me is go get the envelope and open that up, right? And instead of ripping it up, which I wanted to do, I went over, I picked it up, I opened it up, and my mom told her life story in her social work program. She got an A. And under the A, it said, please give this to Cheri. And I thought, what's that about? And when I say functionally illiterate, I could read maybe third or fourth grade, I guess. And so I started to go through this autobiography, and my mom talked about her mom and being given to her aunt when she was little, and then being picked up and moved to California, and then she met my dad and talked about all of that stuff and having the kids, and then she talked about meeting my stepdad or her boyfriend, which is a jazz guy, and what happened with that. And then I turned the second page to the third page, and then on top of the third page, it said, the only reason I survived all of this is I took my anger and hatred out on my second child, and I ruined her life. She's strung out, she's on the streets. And for the first time, I'm reading something, and I'm thinking, I screamed out my whole life, like, what is it about me that is so wrong, right? And all of a sudden I read, it wasn't about me at all. And I felt like God himself said, this was not about you at all. And if you trust me, I can change your life. And I thought, there's no way. Because even at that point, I thought, even God cannot. I had 42, 47. I don't even remember how many warrants for my arrest at that time. I was strung out. I was living in a drug house. I am not wanted by my mom. And even getting the sense of God could change that. I couldn't get that sense. And I believe that what God gave me, has anybody had a vision from God? Where you just kind of get a sense of something? I think he gave me a vision. And if there's anybody in the room that is Christian, you got to hear this. He gave me a vision of who I am the day after resurrection. Not the day after I pull a needle out of my arm. The day after this whole thing, I am clothed in light. I am loved. I'm not an abused kid. I'm not an unwanted child. I'm not a druggie in recovery. And so he didn't show me any of the steps that I'm going to be taking next. He showed me the ultimate step that you're going to be taking. And I just started weeping like, I have never been clean. I have never been beautiful. I've never been wanted. And in that vision, I was all of that. And then what I said was, if this is where you're taking me, I will do anything. I would do anything. Then, are we done at 8:30? Okay. So I then wanted to crawl out the window of the drug house because I didn't want to take God through the living room with a naked guy, right? And I thought, God shouldn't be seeing this. But I want to say God does his best work with naked guys in the living room. I've seen it over and over myself. But it's like, so I wanted to get God out of there. And then I called everybody I know. I only know drug addicts. I only know prostitutes. I only know people that own strip clubs and that kind of thing. And I didn't have anyone to call and say, can I do withdrawals at your house? Can I come over? I think I just met God. Anybody that I said that to and the people I knew, they would just think I was frying on acid or something, right? And I wanted to just tell anybody. So I did call someone that said they had a sister who was Christian, and I'll call her and see if you can come over. And so he called his sister, and she said yes. And so it was 7.5 hours away from where I was. I didn't take one drug with me. Now just imagine, I've been doing drugs heavily for 10 years, and I took no drugs with me. I get to her house. Can you come up for a minute? I want to use you as an example. Is that okay? Yeah, because you're so beautiful. She was so beautiful. So I drive all of this way. Oh, that's all right. You can bring it. Is it going to be okay for you to come up? No, if it's tough, I'll find somebody else beautiful. So let's see. Can you come up? Come on. So anyhow, so I get to this house, and this woman answers the door, and she says, I get to this woman's house, right? I should have gone to the tub, but anyhow, so I get to this woman's house. She answers the door, and she says, I just want you to know I really love you. And I was so angry, like, what are you going to give me, a Christian track or something? I was so mad that she said she loved me. I said, you don't even know me. You don't even know me. And I'm so angry about that. But of course, I respect the adults in my life, so I don't say a thing. And she brings me in the house, and she puts me in the living room, and she puts some hymns on. Hymns, like music. Yeah, hymns, right? And so she puts some hymns on, and it was two twin sisters that harmonized together and sang together. And I'm withdrawing from drugs, right? I'm thinking somebody's got to turn that off, because that is just horrible, right? And she's like, you'll get used to it. And I'm thinking, I hope not, because it's bad, right? And I'm just like, I want to throw the unit. I want to stop the music. And I'm just having a hard time. And she's going in the living room, and she's getting ready for Sabbath. I don't even know what that means. And so she's getting ready for Sabbath. And I go in there, and I said, excuse me, but do you have some coffee? She said, no. Do you have tea? Dr. Pepper? Do you have Pepsi? Do you have any chocolate? Do you have any sugar? And I'm thinking, am I in hell? What is happening here, right? And so I thought, this is where they send somebody that's really messed up their whole life. They send them to hell, with nothing, right? And she says, I'm a vegan vegetarian. I said, what is that? She says, I don't eat anything that has a mother. I said, I don't want to eat your mother. I just want some coffee, right? And so, thank you very much. And so the whole thing, it was just so crazy. She said, I have lentils. And I thought, who would eat that? Look at that. It looks nasty, right? And I'm like, I don't even want lentils. And she says, well, are you thirsty? And I said, yes, I want some coffee or Dr. Pepper or something. She says, what do you typically drink? And I've thought about that. And she said, would you like some water? Please, if you're an addict, raise your hand if you've ever said this. I can't stomach water. Too much chlorine. And I mean, every addict I know has said that. We could drink straight anything, right? So she said, do you drink alcohol? I said, yes. And tequila was my favorite. And she said, did it take you a while to get used to that? I said, yeah. Water's like that. You'll get used to it. And I remember thinking, I hate this woman. Who is this woman? And she started saying you need to shower 5 or 6 times a day to get the drugs off your skin, because sometimes we smell the oils and we relapse. You need to, one time I'm withdrawing horribly. And she says, you know what, the sun's out. We need to go take a hike. And I said, you could take a hike. I'm withdrawing from drugs, right? She said, she was old. I was 23. And she took me outside, and she's hiking up and down mountains. And I am dying. I'm like trying to smoke. I'm trying to, I can't even keep up with you. And I ended up sitting down, and I sat down, and I said, I just can't keep up with you. And she said, okay, I'm going to hike a little bit further, and I'll come back for you. And as I was sitting there just whining, like feeling sorry for myself. This is horrible. What was I thinking? Who's crazy enough to think that you can get off of drugs? And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden this bird lands like right almost by my head, right on this branch. And I thought, he's really disturbing me when I'm trying to be self-pity, right? I'm like, what are you doing? And he's preening himself, like he's preening his feathers and stuff. And I'm trying to whine still. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? I'm like, I could reach out and touch him. I thought, what is up with you? And he just kept doing it. And finally I said, God, why isn't this bird afraid of me? And I just felt like what God said is because I take care of him. And if you trust me, I promise you I can take care of you. And I just started weeping. And I'm sorry, can I go just 5 minutes more? So when I came back in, one of the things that I realized is that God was not gone when I got in the car to go to Donna's house. Her name is Donna. And that her husband, what do you think her husband did for a living? Just think about how cool God is. What do you think her husband did? He was a dentist. He looked at me and he said, can I give you some teeth? Because I had 2 teeth missing, and like any addict, my teeth looked horrible. And I just started crying. I said, I don't have any insurance. And I don't have any money. And he said, I know. And he took me to his practice, and he did all the x-rays and stuff and found out my whole jaw was rotted. For drug addicts, if you've been on the street long enough, it's not just your teeth are rotted, your jaw is rotted. And so he said, I'm sorry, I don't think I can do much. And I started crying, and he said, but whatever I can do, I'll do. But he had to cut completely across the top of my mouth, open everything up, scrape out the jaw, pack that in with antibiotics, and he did all that, saved most of the teeth, and he gave me a little flipper tooth where the ones that were missing. And I got to smile for the first time in years without being self-conscious. And I just cried, like, what kind of God does that stuff, right? What kind of God does that? And I came back, and Donna said, one time we were talking, and she said, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? And when I was really young, I got molested by an uncle. And I was in a room with all my cousins, and he came in thinking that everybody was asleep. Nobody was asleep. They just pretended they were asleep because somebody walked in, an adult walked in. He molested me and walked out. Nobody said anything. The other kids didn't say anything. But what I thought is, I am that kid, and now everybody knows how dirty I am. Everybody knows how messed up I am. And I was telling her that story, and she started crying. And I said, what are you crying about? Like, did I miss something? And she said, that wasn't your fault. And I don't know if I just never heard that before, but it wasn't my fault. She said, if you had a choice between having a loving home where you were loved and nurtured and taken care of, or the home you had, what would you pick? And I just started crying. I wanted to be loved my whole life. I wanted to be accepted my whole life. And I started crying. And at that time, Christians are the funniest people. I don't mean to be offensive to you guys, but they are very funny. And as soon as I started crying and connected with her, she went like this, and the Bible slid out from her sleeve. It's like we were in the middle of Bible study, and I thought, where does that come from? How do you guys do that? And so she told me about David and him killing Bathsheba's husband, and the fact that he went into depression, and actually was that God forgave him. Told me about the woman that was called into adultery and pulled in front of Jesus and thrown at his feet. And that didn't get to me as much as, so this woman was thrown at his feet, and they were going to stone her to death, right? And all because she was having sex with somebody. And I thought, okay. And so what Jesus said is that whoever has no sin, throw the first stone. And then he revealed all of their sin to them by writing in the sand. Nobody could see it, she said, but the person that the sin belonged to. Like, he wrote everything you ever thought or did in the sand, right? But nobody else saw it. And for some reason, I thought, do we have a God that is not here to shame us? He's not here to expose us. He just says, just between you and I, step away. Because Satan will shame you someday with the very thing that you're hiding. But God said, that's not my intention. My intention is to heal you. And so I just got that. And then she says, and I'll have to end with this story, but she says, I want to tell you one more story about this guy. He was ugly. And I thought, yeah, really ugly, foaming at the mouth, ugly, chained up, living in a cemetery. And I'm thinking, man, and beating people up. He was a guy that would have raped or molested someone. And so she said, did I say he was ugly? And I'm thinking, yeah, but I want to hear that story, because what if he was every molester that I ever had? I want to hear what happens to him. I hope that body parts are cut off. I hope he's skinned alive. And I'm just hoping all these things. And she said, did I say he was ugly? You did. And then she went on, and I said, hold up. I think I dated that guy. And she just looked at me like I was out to lunch. I watched 300 bikers urinate on the three of us, beat this girl and rape this girl until she died. Her lungs filled up with fluids, and I got beat so badly you couldn't recognize me, right? And they said that I didn't know that guy. And then she kept talking. Did I say he was ugly? You did. I want to know what happened. She said, Jesus gets out of the boat. Jesus is God, right? And walks up to this guy. He opens his mouth and cusses him out. I thought, I know I dated that guy. Because I've been in a car. Raise your hand if you've had this situation. Been in a car selling drugs, 2:30 in the morning. Anybody? So driving down the street, get pulled over by the police, and the driver starts cussing the police out. I'm thinking, don't you know we're going to prison? You don't shut up, we are going to prison. And I'm thinking, in the only time in your life that you need to just have common sense, don't say another word. We got drugs in the car. Our eyes are this big around, right? And so she says again, did I say he was ugly? But as I'm listening to her story, all of a sudden, Jesus pulls out all the demons in him and takes them to the water and sits by the water with him and cleans them up. And he's in his right mind for the first time ever. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. That is not how I wanted this story to end. That was not the ending. Did he even say, I'm sorry? Did he even say, you know what, I've been a bad guy? Did he say any of that? And so I'm thinking, I don't want God. You know, you could take this whole God thing. If nobody, I have been molested since I was 3 months old. I have been trashed my whole life. I don't know how to socialize. I don't know how to sit next to someone. I don't even know how to connect. Today I have chaotic attachment disorders. You and I should have some sessions. So, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And nobody's going to say, I'm sorry. Nobody's going to say, hey, that was wrong. And so I'm like, I'm just furious. And she says, wait a minute. One of the things that most people don't talk about, that this guy couldn't say any of that because he was so full of demons. He was so full of addictions. He was so full of so many things that he couldn't say, help. I need some help. But Jesus saw in his heart, he heard a scream, please do not leave me like this. And that's what Jesus responded to and pulled out all the demons and all the addictions. And I realized there's a God that doesn't want to shame us, doesn't want to have us. It's like, I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm not here to shame you. I'm not here for you to even say the right words. When you can't say the words, I will still respond to your heart and I will still get you clean. And I'm only here to get you clean, to give you a life that you don't have to escape from. And I remember from that moment on, is my whole journey was to figure out who this God is and where do I fit? Where do I put my foot down? And so when I, as soon as I could, 23, 1979. And I remember as soon as I put my foot down, is Donna said, you need to learn to read, you need to go back to school, and you need to just create a life for yourself. And one step after another was doing that was the scariest thing I ever did because I don't fully fit in this life. Would you invite me to potluck? You would. I love you. So, but you know, I don't fully fit in this life, but I don't fit in the other life, right? So it's like when you step out of your addictive life, you don't fit anywhere. And so the reason, like John and I are partners on this whole thing on connection, is the reason connection is so important for anybody that's trying to do a new life, a life coming out of addictions, is because we don't fit. And if we just sit down and listen to somebody teach about the Bible or listen to a Revelation seminar, even if it's perfect, it's not going to help us to fit. I've got to know that there's a seat that I can sit. I've asked my mom my whole life, can I sit next to you? And if I come into the church and still don't know I can sit next to someone, that's an issue. So connection is the most important thing in any Christian church, that we have to connect with each other and not just teach. Teach is great. Reading the Bible is great. I love all of that stuff. But if we don't connect, all of that stuff is useless. Thank you very much. All right.